I assume you've hit the button. Welcome to all. We are here on a call on Friday, the 5th of March, and this is a National Cyber League um, HBCU orientation level one call. And we are all from HBCUs, be it student, faculty, or staff. And we have our partner on the line, and they'll introduce themselves from the National Cyber League. And the intent of today's call, simply put, is to help students and even faculty who are new to the National Cyber League get some insight and a bit of an orientation on how to build those skills up so it's less intimidating and less overwhelming to begin with. And once we crack that nut, it is a lot of fun, it's challenging, and I think you'll find it inspiring to participate. So with that, I'd like to introduce Franz Payer, who is with Skyline, which is the engine under the National Cyber League, the portal under the National Cyber League. And he's going to take us through a couple um, of items, some advice, some guidance, and suggestions on how to get started with the National Cyber League. So
All
Franz?
right, thank you, Bob, and thanks everyone for joining us today. Before I move forward, actually, I just want to check Tally. I think I need the permission to share the screen. So while we get that sorted out, I just want to introduce the concept of the National Cyber League. So the National Cyber League, it's not just a competition; it's a game. It's a community of people who are interested in cybersecurity. And the idea behind the National Cyber League is that we're helping prepare students for a career in cybersecurity. And we do that through real world, practical, hands-on challenges. And so when you go through an NCL season, basically what's involved is there is a gym environment, it's a practice environment where students will be able to go through and see some examples of how they solve different challenges and learn that way. Then we have a preseason, which is an opportunity for everyone to do a little bit of a competition to understand where everyone's skill sets are. So then we can divide into beginner, intermediate, and advanced. And in NCL, we call those the gold, silver, the bronze, silver, and gold brackets. Following that, we have an individual component, which is the individual game, and that runs over a weekend. And then after that, we have a team component, which runs over another weekend. And that's the NCL season. And throughout this entire process, you have access to our community Slack, where you can ask for advice, get some mentorship and guidance. We also have the NCL player ambassadors who they do weekly webinars, and you can go ask questions there, get help. And they also have blog posts that they put out all the time, explaining different concepts and topics. So that's what the NCL is. The first part, as I mentioned, is going through the gym. And I'm going to walk through what the gym looks like and how you process that. And if any of our guests today have any questions, please ask in the chat for the benefit of everyone in the group. I'm sure someone else is going to have the same question. Can I get confirmation that the screen is being shared? Okay, great. So this is kind of what the platform looks like when you start jumping into content. I want to start by saying, if you look on the left side, we have all these different topics. So we have, there are 9 topics to NCL. You actually see a 10th one here because wireless access exploitation used to be its own separate category. We've kind of combined that with network traffic analysis now. But there's a lot of different things that are covered here. And if you're coming into security or NCL for the first time, it's not expected that you know everything. It's actually expected that you're going to be learning a lot through this process. And the main component about NCL is helping you learn how to learn, helping you learn how to pick up new skills on the fly. And as I mentioned, this is supposed to prepare you for a career in cybersecurity. What happens in cybersecurity? You get a job, new technology gets implemented into your network, or there's a new attack that came out. You have to respond on the fly. You're not going to have a course that has taught you everything you need to learn, to know. You need to be able to figure out, using Google, any other online resources, be very scrappy to get to the point where you understand enough about the technology, enough about the topic that you can perform whatever task it is that is required of you. And we mimic that within NCL. And so I just want to normalize the fact that most beginners get maybe like 10, 20, 30% of the content, and that's perfectly fine. We build NCL to be accessible to beginners, advanced students alike. And so there's content there that's for more of the advanced students, and you're not expected to know that. It's about growth, and you're going to do NCL once, and then you're going to improve, and you're going to try to compare how did I do this season compared to last season. Now, with that, I'll jump into our first category, and we try to order the categories in ascending difficulty. And so open source intelligence is where we're going to get started. And we're just jumping straight into it. You can see that typically what happens is you're going to be given a series of questions in this bottom corner, and I'll actually zoom in so it'll be easier for people to see. But you'll be given several questions, most likely, and it's your job to kind of analyze the artifacts and stuff that we gave you to answer those questions. And this first question is asked about metadata. And so if you're not familiar with metadata, metadata is additional information that is included with a picture that can be used to identify, or it's just descriptive information. So that information could contain information like who took the picture, what camera, what model make was it. A lot of times GPS coordinates are in those photos. And that's why sometimes there's problems where if you upload it to social media and that information isn't removed, people can figure out where you were. And so that's how it ties into cybersecurity, and that's why it's relevant here. And so right now we have this image of a lamb, and we're asking you to analyze it and figure out, okay, when was this image created? Now, when you go through this process, if we're never familiar with metadata before, what you should be doing is looking at this prompt and saying, okay, extract metadata. I need to go and I need to do a search on metadata and understand what is metadata. There's a lot of resources out there about metadata. You can go look that up. We're specifically worried about image metadata, trying to understand what metadata is in this image. And there's actually a link here to a site where you can upload the image, and you'll have the ability to view the metadata that way. And so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to come here, I'm going to download that image, I'm going to come to this other website, and I'm going to upload it. And then there's our image. And we start getting a lot of information that you can see over here. This is all the metadata. And so I can see the date when it was taken. I can see the file size. There's GPS coordinates in here. I have information about the camera. I have information about kind of like the pixel density, all sorts of this stuff. And when you go look at the questions, that's when you start, getting all of these answers. And so when was image created? Okay, let me go back over here. I have the image creation date, May 15th, 2015. Oh, it's actually asking for the time as well. Okay, so I need to go here, 2015, May 15th. And what time was it? It was at 2:14. 2:14. And there we go. We got our first correct answer within NCL. And that's basically like the process of going through. In the gym, you actually have the ability to look at a solution guide. And so in our solution guide, we mention that you can use this website, which is the exact same website we just went through. And this is what it's going to look like when you upload the file. This is one of the more like introductory challenges, and they will start building upon each other. If we go further on, we can see within this category, we have a barcode here, and you scan the barcode. What format does the barcode use, right? So this is something where you can go online, you can Google for like barcode readers, upload it to the barcode reader, and then when it successfully reads it, it'll tell you what type it is sometimes. And so you just go around and you try to be resourceful, because off the bat, I don't expect you to know, like, I don't know what barcode format that is. And I don't expect you to be an expert. That's why we use Google. That's why we use online resources to figure that out. Let me check on the chat as well, because I'm realizing Tally, can you actually flag me if there's any questions in the chat? Because I'm realizing now that while I'm presenting, I can't see the chat. And so this is basically covering some of the basics. Now, if we go up to the to a different category, we go to cryptography. This is completely different, right? So nothing that we did in open source intelligence really helps with cryptography. They're different topics. I mean, so you're learning each one kind of independently. And in this one, we are discussing different number bases. And so if you're not familiar with the idea of binary versus hexadecimal, we actually have this little guide that walks you through it. And I'll walk through it as well. But the main takeaway that I want everyone to get is that when you go through NCL, like I said before, you're not expected to know everything. You're expected to figure out, how can I be crafty? How can I be resourceful to get to the answer? Because again, this is exactly going to be what you're looking for. You're going to have to do in the job. And I'd say one of the biggest benefits for NCL, if you're trying to figure out like what is in it for you, is when you go get it, when you're going to apply for an internship or a job, and you go to that interview, they're going to ask you, what have you done in security? Like, what projects have you done? What have you done on your own time? What can you share about demonstrating some sort of skill that you had? And most people are going to reference a class, which is great. But it's much more powerful if you can say, well, on my spare time, I am really interested in this. So I participate in the National Cyber League. I learned about cryptography, different number bases, metadata, all these sorts of things. You're going to run into one challenge that stumped you for a while, and then you finally solved it. And then you can talk about that process of how you encountered a challenge and what you did to overcome it. And that becomes very, very powerful if you're trying to set yourself aside from all the other hundreds of people applying for those different jobs. It's a great way to get that experience, a great way to have that story that you can tell during the interview. And so I'm going to use the example that, like, you've never dealt with binary, you've never learned about number bases, you just have, high school math. And we're looking at this for the first time. And so right now, I'm going to simplify a little bit. If you want to dig deeper into this, you can go through the gym. But basically, theory behind number bases is we are used to 10 different digits in our number system, 0 through 9. Those are 10 digits. That's where base 10 comes from. And you could have, in theory, fewer or more digits and characters within your numbering system. So what if, instead of using 10 digits, 0 through 9, we use 2 digits, 0 and 1. And that's binary. And so if you think about, how do you count? You go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then what happens after that is that you add 1 to the next column in your, in the tens unit, the tens place. And then you reset the ones place back to 0. And the same thing happens with binary. You're going to go 0, 1, and then now you're at the end of your digits. And so now you have to increment your next column. So now you're at 1, and then you reset to 0. So you went from 0, 1 now to 10. And so you can see that over here. We count, this is 0, this is 1. We did the reset, this is 2. Now we increment again, this is 3. We reset both of these digits, and then we increment the next unit over here, and so forth, right? I'd recommend like trying to draw this out or using your fingers if this is something that's new for you. But that's basically the concept of how do you count in binary when you're limited that way. And you're probably wondering why is this important? Like, why does this matter at all? And it's because this will become more relevant later on with different challenges. But when data is stored on a computer, it's basically, it goes down to ones and zeros. And the reason for that is that it's physically represented. And you can, depending on what technology you're using, you can imagine that like it's magnets. So you have a bunch of different magnets, and the magnets are either positively charged or negatively charged. And the positive charge can be a 1 or it can be a 0. The negative charge could be a 1 or a 0. And when you want to store data, what you're doing is you're flipping the charge on the magnet to become positive or become negative. And that's why you only have those two options. You only have a positive charge or negative charge. And then when you go read the data, you just have a device go through and check which things are positive and which things are negative. And suddenly now you have a bunch of positive negatives, which you can turn into ones and zeros. And then now you need to convert those ones and zeros into something useful, like storing a number that all the rest of us can understand. And so that's why you need to convert from these ones and zeros back into our normal numbering system. Now, that's a limitation where we now have to go from 2 digits, down to two different digits. You might actually want to have more than 10 digits. You might want to have, you want to be able to actually store more information using less space, like using less tens and hundreds and thousands places. And so that's where hexadecimal comes in. And the reason why hexadecimal primarily exists is, one, it's a power of 2. And so because of the fact that a lot of stuff is stored in binary, it's a lot simpler for computers to do things in powers of 2. And so powers of 2, you have 2, 4, 8, 16. 16 is hexadecimal. And so whereas we normally go from 0 to 9 in our normal numbering system, you can actually go further than that, where you go from 9 to A, B, C, D, E, and F. And if you actually count all of that, 0 to 9 plus A through F, you get 16 different possibilities as a digit. And just like we did with the counting example that we did with binary, when you go through with hexadecimal, you have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Now we get to 10. Normally, we would reset because we ran out of digits, and then set this to 0, and then we increment our next unit. We keep going because we have more. We now have an A, and then we have a B, and then a C, and a D, and an E, and an F. And then only when we get to the F are we out of different possibilities for digits. And so that's when we do the reset. We set this to 0, and then we increment the next unit to the left. And then we just keep going, and so forth. And so that's why number bases are important. And that's how it connects us to computers and cybersecurity, is that there's a lot of times where you might be dealing with a specific representation of data. Sometimes you might get data as binary. Sometimes you might get it as hexadecimal. And to elaborate on why you would want to use hexadecimal, if you're trying to read data, you can store more of it if you use hexadecimal. And so it's a matter of convenience. If people are like sending data to each other, instead of having to like read everything in decimal, if you can read it in hexadecimal, you can actually use like less screen space, like physically less space to communicate that data. Now we start going into these different challenges of like, okay, can you convert this information, this message into an actual value? And it's actually pretty convenient for us, because there's a bunch of different websites that'll help do that for you. And so I can see here, this is hexadecimal. There's 2 ways I know this. One is that there's a 0x in front of it. That might be some insider knowledge that you might gain later, but the 0x typically denotes that this is a hexadecimal value. But a second way you can figure that out is just by looking at what the characters are here. So I can see that it doesn't just have ones and zeros, so it's not binary. And what you typically want to look at are kind of the extreme ends of the range. And so there's always going to be a 0 value of some sort. And so you're looking at the high end, what does it go to? And I can see, all right, well, there's definitely like actual alphabetic characters in here. And so it's more than base 10. And I can see there's an E and there's an F. And so I can probably guess relatively safely that this is hexadecimal that way, if you didn't know what the OX meant in the beginning. And so I can take this value and I can go online, I can go hex to hex converter. Let me just do that. So I convert, this is not, oops, sorry. I want, okay. What I really want to do is actually space these out. um, and this is part of this challenge is that, now here we go. I'll just take this and put it here. There we go. That made it faster. But you basically would just Google around for different converters that would help you. And this actually uses another concept, which is another conversion thing, where, okay, we can convert this into decimal values. And then there's actually a second step that this kind of took, which is how do I convert numbers into text? And so there's something called the ASCII table. And the ASCII table basically says it's a mapping of this number can represent this character. And if you go all the way down here, you can see decimal 65 represents uppercase A, and decimal 18 represents lowercase v. And it's just doing that conversion. And so what's happening when I use this tool is it's converting each of these pairs of numbers into directly into ASCII. And so I could take the 73 and look at where's my 73. This is sorry, I gotta look at the hexadecimal column. 73, that's an S. And that's the first S that we got in Scorpion. You might be wondering, well, why am I splitting them out like this? And it has to do with another power of 2, and the fact that we typically store data in bytes. You probably heard of that term before. A byte is 8 bits. 8 bits means 8 ones and zeros. And so typically you're dealing, in general, in most circumstances, the smallest order of like unit that you're dealing with is a byte. And a byte can hold the 8 ones and zeros, and 8 ones and zeros can be represented with 2 hexadecimal values. And so 8 ones and zeros lets you put in a value between 0 and 255. And this is because of the way the powers of 2 work. Basically, you can go from 00 to FF in hexadecimal, and that will cover the entire range of 0 to 255 and represent 1 byte. And then when we have 1 byte, we can now match the 1 byte to 1 character. And that's what ASCII table does, is it has all of these different values that go from 0 to 127. So it doesn't actually even use the full byte to represent all these different characters. And that's basically the process, is that like when you go through and you're trying to learn, we have some of the fundamental stuff for you, but a lot of what you're doing is like going to these different websites and running Google searches and trying to understand, like, okay, I Googled online for a like converter to convert hexadecimal and to convert binary. And then you're like, oh, what is ASCII encoding? That worked, that helped solve the problem. And then now you're looking at this ASCII table. And so you start asking these questions, and it's definitely at this point very helpful, if you don't understand this stuff, to have a mentor, to have a coach, to have the NCL community where you can start asking those questions and get more clarity, and maybe people can point you in the right direction if you need additional resources to learn. But we basically act as like the jumping off point. When you get started with NCL, we're giving you kind of like the little string for you to follow. Like you keep tugging on that string, you see where it goes, you keep learning. I'm going to jump into another category here for log analysis. And this is just to show you kind of what type of content you're going to expect. And so first time looking at this, I know I have to analyze a log. Here's the log. I don't know what any of this stuff means. We go read the prompt and it says, analyze this SSH log file. So if you don't know what that means, let's go Google what SSH is. What is SSH? Okay, SSH is the secure shell. And I'm going to go on this Wikipedia page. I'm going to read about SSH. What does it do? How does it work? As a simplification, SSH is a way for, it's a service that allows you to remotely log into a computer, to a computer terminal. And so this log has something to do with that service. And if you do more Googling around, you do more searching, if I start like Googling some of these like, so let me just type in like SSH failed password. I start like searching online for some of these, some of the things from the file. You can actually start seeing like, oh, this person posted their SSH log online. And then you can read what people are saying about it. Failed password. Oh, this has to do with your configuration. You'll discover that this is the log where all of the login attempts get saved. And so when you're looking at this, you can see, okay, there's a connection from this IP address, and then they try to type in a password and it was the incorrect password. And then you can see that it keeps happening. And basically, if you have ever run an SSH server before, or if you kind of guessed about what hackers might be doing, the reason why this is relevant is because hackers will go online and just randomly try to connect to people's SSH servers and guess passwords, seeing if they can log in. And that's what we might be seeing here. I'm going to take a little bit of a shortcut and kind of look at what the guide says. And let's just reflect on the first question. What is the host name of the SSH server? And so we give you the little shortcut. We say the host name is this column. And so I can just go in here and then put that in there and get that. But a lot of these questions, you can figure out how to do it very easy by yourself, right? What is the first IP address to attack the server? If you don't know what an IP address is, you go and Google that and you can see what they look like and you do some pattern recognition and you can see, oh, well, this is an IP address. It's the first one in the file. And there's a connection and then there's a failed password. And so let me just go enter that in. Bam, I got that correct. Okay, what's the second password? I'm looking for something that's just different. And so this one's a different IP address. I go take this, I put it in there, I got it correct. You're kind of just working through this whole process. Who is targeted? Looks like it was this Harvey guy. He keeps showing up in here. There we go. Who was able to log in? And so you probably don't want to look for like a failed password. You probably want to look for, okay, at the very bottom, that makes it easy, accepted password. So accepted password for Harvey. Here's the IP address. I copy that, I put it in here. And that's what NCL is just like identifying what you don't know and then figuring out, okay, I can go Google for this. Oh, I can, I like that gave me a little bit of a breadcrumb, a little bit of context. I do more Googling. But it's definitely very helpful. And we always recommend when you go do NCL to have a friend, to have like other students in your class, to have a mentor, to have your coach who can provide you with some help or with some guidance if you get stuck. And we also have the community available for that. But that's what that looks like. I'll go through one more example, and so that you can see what else is in NCL. And I'm actually using a past challenge that we've done, and I've zoomed in too much, so I'm gonna have to undo that. But I gave you some of those foundational blocks, and I mentioned at the beginning that NCL is supposed to tie to what you might expect in the real world in a job. And you might not have seen that in those previous challenges. Sorry, I had to do the foundational stuff before we get to the fun stuff. And so I'm going to the fun stuff right now. And there's a little bit of shortcut. You gotta eat your vegetables before you can eat dessert. If you're completely new, you have to learn those fundamentals, those basics. But when you start getting further on, this might be one of the challenges that is accessible to you. And the scenario that we have here, I'm going to zoom back in again. There we go. The scenario that we have is that you're an analyst, you're a cybersecurity analyst. Congratulations, you have a new job now. And it's your job to identify a new malware that is on the computer network. And so you've been given some samples, and you know that the malware contains this string. If you don't know what a string is basically just text characters, as well as a byte sequence. And this byte sequence is provided in hexadecimal. Like I mentioned before, it's much easier to provide that information in hexadecimal rather than binary. And it's very helpful as well because these are specifically bytes. So if you put this in decimal, they wouldn't be, it's not a power of 2. And so they wouldn't show up cleanly as 2 characters. They would show up as 3 characters, and like because and some digits wouldn't get used in certain places because of that. So hexadecimal makes that more convenient. And then now we're saying you should use this Yara tool to help with the malware identification. And our very first question is how many samples are provided? And so we have some other challenges in here where you get to play around with a Linux terminal, and this is a skill that you want to use. But we specifically say we gave you a Linux server. And so if you don't know anything about that, you can go Google, how do I use a Linux, Linux environment? And there's a lot of other resources out there that can help teach you. And you can take some of that and then practice on some of the terminal environments that we give you within the platform. But I already know Linux. And so I'll walk you through what you should be doing and explaining what I'm doing in the meantime. And so the first thing we want to do is we want to just see what's on this computer. And so I'm going to type in ls, which provides a listing of all of the files in my current folder, files and other folders in this folder. It's basically, if you imagine you use Finder or you use the Windows Explorer, you get like a graphical representation of like what folders and files are in the current folder that I'm looking at. This is the same concept, but just over text. And so I can see I have this rule.yara, and that's probably gonna be relevant because it was mentioned in the prompt. And there's a samples folder. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do CD, which is change directory. It's gonna move me into that folder. And if we're using the same Finder analogy, this is like someone double clicking into another folder. So you go further in. And so I'm going into the samples folder. I'm gonna do another listing again. And you can see, wow, we have a lot of things here. I'm just going to scroll up and I can see it goes from the sample 0 all the way to sample 99. And so if you do the math on that, there's 100 different samples. So I come here, I type in, there are 100 samples. Bam, I got my correct answer there. And so we're actually pretty flexible with how you submit your answers. We're kind of just searching for some of the keywords, and we do a little bit of natural language processing. And so if the answer was supposed to be like 1,000, you could type in the number 1,000, the words 1,000. You could do like 1,000 without the comma. You can do 1,000 with the comma. You can do 1,000.00. All of those, if the answer was supposed to be 1,000, they would get marked as correct. And so you don't have to really fight about the specific submission pattern. And if you do come up with some creative like syntax that we didn't consider, and you think you got it right, you can open a support ticket, and we'll credit you retroactively if you found a answer submission format that we didn't consider. Now moving on here, the next part is how many samples contain this string, this sequence of characters. And you're probably wondering, like, how do I do that? Well, this is where Yara comes in. So you're probably wondering, how is Yara relevant here? If you do a quick Google search for Yara, you will find out that Yara is a tool where you can provide it a list of basically patterns and signatures, and it will go look for things that match that pattern. So all these samples, those are different files, and we're looking for patterns within those files. And so I'm going to actually go and look at one of these samples. I'm using cat, which means concatenate. Basically, it's going to print out the contents of this file. And you can see that it spit out a bunch of junk. There's some things I can read, like I can read note, I can read version, frame, comment. So there's some stuff in here which is human readable, but there's a lot of stuff in here which is like binary that they don't print out very well. That's why you get all these question marks and weird characters and stuff. And that has to do with the fact that there's actual binary information in this file. It's not supposed to all be human readable. And I'm pretty sure this is an actual computer program based on some of these things that I'm seeing here. But that's what the samples contain, and we need to figure out which one of these samples matches the pattern that they told us. And so we're trying to match this specific sequence. And we see that we have a rule. Now, if you want to read how do I use Yara, you can type in man and then Yara. Man is manual. And so that pulls up the manual on Yara, and you can read more about how to use Yara. And you can see that we have the rules here, and I'm going to just print those out. And we actually, by default, provided you with a rule that would match that string. And so you actually don't need to make a modification to the file. You can just run Yara, and I'm going to give it the rule, and then I'm going to tell it to run on all the files in the samples folder. And so it's telling me now every single sample that matched. And so I can come here, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take all of this output that showed up on my screen, and I'm going to send it to another program called WC, which is word count. It's a little bit deceiving because it also helps you do line counts. And so this -L option will give you a line count, and I can run that and I can see, wow, I got 80 of them. Alternatively, if you really want to, you could go and just manually count it. You could take all of this and like copy and paste it into an Excel spreadsheet or something to get it. There's a lot of different ways you can solve challenges. And I want to emphasize that I'm showing you some examples of how we do it. You can find a bunch of different creative ways, and we see that all the time in NCL. We want you to find those creative ways to solve problems. So if like sometimes I'm like the example that we provide is like something that wasn't intuitive to you, there's probably like 2 or 3 other ways you could have done it that we didn't describe. Like I mentioned, I could send this into the word count program. I could manually count these, or I can put them in Excel or any other program that's going to let you get a line count. All right, so let me type in my 80. That matches. And now it's asking for the file name of the malware sample. And so I got to go remember the prompt up here. And it said the malware has this string and this byte sequence. And so we have to go and add the byte sequence to the rules. And so we actually support the copy and paste between the terminal environment and the rest of the browser. And so I can just come here, hit copy, and I'm going to use this tool called Vim, which is a file editor, to open up the file. And actually, beginners will probably be using Nano. And so I'll go here in Nano, and I can add another condition. And so this would require you to go and Google around and read the manual on how, oops, the daisies. I don't think the copy and, sorry, I don't know how to copy and paste very well in Nano, so I'm just gonna go back to Vim. I'm gonna paste in here the sequence, or you could type it out. But you just go learn how does the Yara tool work, because if you're on the job and then there's a new tool that comes out and you got to learn how to use it for your job, it's the same thing you'd have to do. I have to use Yara, time to go Google about Yara, time to go to their website, time to figure out what their documentation says and learn that, I need to add, I see that here, there's already a condition for the string. I need to add the condition for the byte sequence. And then I need to say I'm matching on A and B. The A condition saying, let's match on files that have this string, and the B matching any files that have this byte sequence. And so we have A and B, and then we're just going to do exactly what we did before, where we're going to run Yara with the rules on the samples. And only one sample matches that time, which is great because there should only be one answer to this question. And I come back here, I type in sample 32, and I've completed the challenge. And so I know this could seem a little bit like scary if you've never done used YAR before, like this is completely new to you. But you have the ability to Google around, to ask friends. If it's during the game, you can't ask friends, but if it's like during the practice gym, or if it's outside of the games, you can ask friends how things work. But the whole purpose of this is helping you develop those skills on how do I learn how to learn? Like, how do I learn how to pick up a new skill very quickly? How do I learn how to get to the answer? And I think these skills are probably going to be pretty valuable for you uh, outside of cybersecurity, just like in general. Like, you encounter something for the first time, you have to pick it up really quickly. It's important for you to figure out, how do I use the resources at my disposal to get to what I need to do? And that's what NCL is. Now I want to show another thing which is helpful if you're a beginner. I think it's very important for you to see this, because sometimes you don't even get to the to seeing what the reports look like, and you might just feel like, you know, you're really behind the pack and really behind what everyone else is doing. This is the score distribution of an NCL game, and if this was a class, it wouldn't be very good. We see that like the bulk of people are getting less than a 30%. And that's okay. I want to reinforce that this is okay, right? NCL is built for beginners, intermediates, and advanced students. And you can see there are a very small number of very advanced students who are able to get basically to the very end. But most people are coming in as beginners. A vast majority of people are beginners. And so what I recommend for people when they get into NCL is set a personal goal and focus on that personal goal, and focus on the growth between seasons. And so you can come in saying, I just want to solve like 2 questions from cryptography, 2 questions from open source intelligence, and then kind of work my way up there. Maybe next season, I'm going to go for 4 questions or 5 questions. And then you'll see, and this is how people end up getting to the end here. People start in these, like in the bottom, like third here, because people start as beginners, and then they come back in the next season, and then they're now more intermediate. They start coming all the way up. And eventually, if you really stick with NCL, if you really spend the time and you learn how to solve these different challenges and how to use online resources very efficiently, that's when you start getting all the way to the end here. It's NCL is going to have new content, I guarantee you, because people get they get upset when they see this sometimes, where like they go from the gym and they understand everything in the gym, and then they go do the actual individual, the team game, and they're like, hold on a second here, I've never seen this content before. This wasn't covered at all in the gym. And we always respond with yes. Like, the gym wasn't to teach you how to only do the content in the gym. And what we're trying to teach you is not how do you like basically just follow all the patterns and follow all the steps that we give you, and only be able to solve things that you've previously seen before. We're trying to teach you, how do you tackle something that you've never seen before? And so to do that, when you get to the gym, you're going to get stuff in there that like likely has never been covered in the gym or in a class that you've taken. So as an example, we put like 4G telecommunication like network traffic data. Like, here, look at the communication between a phone and a cell tower and analyze that. Unless you're taking some very specialized course, like probably 99% of people have never seen anything that looked like that before. But people are able to solve it. And they were, in the span of like a couple of days, able to do the searching and to put pieces together and come up with the answer. And we want all of our students, all of our players, to get to the point where they don't feel intimidated by that, where they feel like, oh, I've done things like this before. I've done the Google searching and put the pieces together to get to that answer. And so I think it's important to see, this is what the score distribution looks like. Most people are beginners. If you get a 30% your first time, I think that's really great. I think you're actually probably pretty ahead of the pack as a beginner. And some of these categories aren't going to be approachable to you if you're a pure beginner. We have like enumeration exploitation. That's a category where you typically are hacking into something. Like, you're breaking into a computer program. You're trying to, like, you know, break into different systems. We have web application exploitation, which is you breaking into websites. If you've never coded before, if it's your first time learning about IP addresses and all that stuff, it's not going to make sense. It's like, here's the category on rocket science, and you're still taking like basic algebra. You got to work your way up there. But that's kind of things for you to strive for. And that's reason to continue, learning in that experience. And so, I understand as a beginner, there's a lot of things that you're going to be exposed to when you go through NCL. And it's okay to not know the answers. But I think what's important is identifying what don't you know, what do you know, what is that gap, and what do you need to do to bridge that gap. And that's the very important skill that you need to learn. Especially, like I mentioned, in a cybersecurity job, your boss might not provide you all the training and material that you need to deal with whatever the new situation is today. And I'm going to guarantee you that like, if you're going to 4-year college or 2-year college, 4-year especially, very good chance that by the time you graduate, there's a new technology that is out in the wild that wasn't there when you started as a freshman. And so it's going to be impossible to know everything from the beginning. And so that's why this is such an important skill to learn. So that's kind of like the intro I wanted to do. I want to check with the group who's got questions, who needs clarifications on things, what are people's thoughts and feelings, and how do you feel about NCL? I see you've
Franz,
unmuted yourself.
hi,
Oh,
Franz, it's
wow.
Bob. Thank you. And I agree. When you started with the numbering systems, I like that. And it's not necessarily the fun stuff, but it's so important because they see it again and again. They see it in passwords and hashes and things like that. So I absolutely agree. If we can get our students grounded, well grounded in how to look up a numbering system, you don't have to thoroughly understand it, just know how to go to the calculator and convert.
Right. And like I said, you got to eat your vegetables before you get dessert.
I agree. Um, and then repetition. They'll see it again and again, and they'll see patterns and things like that, and they'll know what tools to use.
Mm-hmm. I think like the key skill, I know I emphasized it so much on this call, but like, I welcome all of our NCL students, like when they get stuck, like to please reach out to the on our community Slack. So there's a Slack channel available. It's available from your dashboard. There's an announcement for it when you sign up for NCL. We have thousands of other players who've gone through the same journey that you're going through right now. And if you're like, hey, I don't understand this concept, you can ask and get assistance there.
Yeah.
And so like anytime there isn't like an active game going on, you can ask anyone for help about learning a new skill and learning a new tool.
Right.
And you just don't want to be in a position where like you feel like you get into something you've never seen before and you give up. You're like, oh well, I don't know this, I'm out. That's not an option in the real world. Like it's something that like it's uncomfortable. And we're here to help you get over that feeling of uncomfortableness and get to the point where like you feel like, yes, I've never seen this before. It's okay. I can use the power of the internet to solve this problem. Like everything's possible.
Exactly. And the other thing, the practice gym, the practice gym, the practice gym, the practice gym. Spend your time in the practice gym. And I like what you said about goals. Stay in a domain, right? If it's log analysis, just study log analysis, because I think our minds get scrambled when we say, well, there are 9 more domains. I got all these other questions to answer and so on. But if you just focus on log analysis, and in the practice gym, study the answer, because they're going to see it again. They're going to see these patterns, question types, and things like that again.
Mm-hmm. And
I would say also lean towards the easier. I think open source, log analysis. I like cryptography. I mean, that's fun once you get it. But I would say those might be. And comment on that, Franz. What domains should they go to first to study?
I think it's kind of like the way that we ordered it here, right? I'm looking at an older NCL before we did the transition from wireless to forensics, but we have open source intelligence. I think that's a great place for everyone to start. Cryptography, password cracking, log analysis, network traffic analysis. These two over here, like the web application and the
Yeah,
enumeration exploitation, those are the hard ones.
yeah.
And yeah, I just like kind of walk through it the way that we have it set up. And I also want to say, like, we don't put any barriers up in terms of like what order you do your challenges. Like you can jump between open source intelligence, crypto, and log analysis if you want.
Mhm.
Like you're perfectly free to do that. Um, and so just like if you get stuck and it's not fun for you anymore, it's not interesting, like put it to the side. Maybe you'll have a thought come to you later, go do something else. But like we gave you the sandbox, so like explore the sandbox to whatever makes sense for you. You don't have to bang your head against the table to try to get, a web security challenge when you're not ready for it. So it could be a double-edged sword because we give you the flexibility to make the decision on what you want to look at.
Mhm.
But at the same time, that means you might spend a lot of time doing something that might be out of your element. You kind of have to identify that for yourself. Like I should go do something simpler first and work my way up.
Mhm.
Franz, there is a question in the chat from
Mhm,
Tamara Rogers. It seems that an important skill set is the ability to search for what is already known during the gym and practice.
mhm.
What level of searching will be valid during the games versus during the gym?
The exact same level. So all the normal searching you do, like still do it for the games. The one thing that you're not allowed to do in either circumstance is like go online and like ask people, like post the questions online and start try to get help for that. Like you have to solve it by yourself. But if going and going to search and find like the specification or a Wikipedia page, um, or other people asking related questions, but not like the question in NCL, that's all fair game. Just please don't like go and like ask for help online because that will disqualify you and it ruins the experience for everyone because they can see that too.
Then there's the team game, which is a little bit different. Maybe you would want to spend a couple minutes talking about that.
Right. So the team game is different because for like the individual in the preseason, um you basically have to work by yourself during the duration of that. And then after, like before and after those games, you can ask for help and guidance. During the team game, you can actually talk to all of your teammates. You can have up to 7 people on a team. You can talk to all of them and ask them questions and share answers and share tools and all that stuff. And that's perfectly fine for the team game within your team specifically. And a team means the up to 7 people who are competing together, not like your friend from another class who's on a different team. Like it has to be the 7 people. But um, that's we know that people like collaborating. That's what the team game is for. We just need to make sure that like we maintain the integrity of like, hey, this is a competition where we're people are like trying to compete and get a result. And so if when you're in an individual game, it's got to be an individual effort. You can use your online resources, but you got to be the one to find those answers yourself. You can't go and rely on other people to find the answers. When you're a team game, you can rely on your teammates. You can share anything you want with your teammates, but you're not allowed to share or ask people outside of your team during the team game.
Great. So do you want to talk about for next week what we're planning?
Sure. So for next week, I think we're going to take a little bit of a dive into the other categories. And so we're going to look a little bit into network traffic analysis. We might do a little bit of the web security as well. Just like the very, very basics. These are going to be inherently more challenging topics. But we'll try to cover as much as we can within the time that we have.
And shall we mention our deadline for registration?
Oh, right. Okay, so registration for NCL, we actually are going to be extending it by a week. And so you have the normal registration deadline was this Friday. You're going to have until next Friday, the 12th, to register at the normal registration rate. If you are an HBCU student, there is a form available for you to get a scholarship, so you can participate for free. Everyone else, it's the regular registration deadline for $35 is the 12th, and then the sorry, I gotta pull this up. The late registration deadline is the 16th for $45.
Of March.
Yes, the 14th of March.
All right. Well, with that, I think great job, Franz. Thank you for everybody who was on the call. And we will be back next week.
Thank you, Franz. It was an awesome class.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. And please, if you have any questions, just shoot me an email and I'm happy to answer. And
the email is?
The email is FPAYER. It's my first initial last name. It's on the, it should be in the recording, at cyberskyline.com. And I'll post it in the chat as well.
Great. Well, thank you for joining us, everybody, and see you next week.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Bye.